Hello, everybody. Editor Nathan here. After recording this podcast, I realized that my audio is kind of borked.
To get me thinking, one of the things I was going to talk about was a game that I had returned to.
Because it was apparently recording on two separate audio lines that got merged. To mitigate some of this, I will do voiceover on video clips, so that you don't have to listen to my doubling echo the entire time. And with that being said, let's start the episode. On this episode of Total Pep and Lockdown, Alex and I are going to be discussing the 7 circles of hell, essentially, that are the reasons why we quit playing games, from our best case scenario all the way down to our worst case scenario, and hope you enjoy it.
Let me just kind of start to prime you off on a happier note, which is your best case scenario. Okay, your best case scenario is you have done everything in the game.
It's a reason to stop playing the game?
You've done everything.
You just finished it, 100%ed it, and there's nothing else?
You loved playing the game, you enjoyed playing the game a whole lot, and there's just nothing left to do.
Some of the examples of your best case scenario for me would be Tavern Master, where I did the whole tavern and the winter tavern, and I completed all of the achievements for it. Exit 8, which is actually just a very short game, but I did find all of the anomalies and did basically everything that you can do in the game, even if it only takes a few hours. And Dave the Diver, which is a much lengthier title to complete, but including all of the DLC, I did go through all of that, even going to collect all of the kaiju figures that were in the Godzilla DLC. And the only reason why I stopped playing was legitimately because I didn't really feel like there was anything left to do in the game. This is indeed what I would consider to be the best case scenario for stopping playing the game, when you just realize that there is nothing left to do, and you feel very satisfied with having had the experience, and kind of wish that there was more.
So this obviously does not really lend itself to games that are like forever games, or procedural games. Although you could count it as games that you have done everything you want to do in the game, though. I mean, you could play a game that far and not like it and love it.
That's true.
I don't know why you'd want to play a game that far if you didn't, but you know.
The better case, this is where things get a little bit more muddled. It's, you finished the game, but there are parts you skipped over.
We didn't 100% it.
2 examples I will give you for a better case scenario are Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which, even though I really do like the Borderlands series, and I would usually play those entries for 100 hours plus, I didn't play Wonderlands as much, but I did indeed finish the game, and as far as I can tell, I did all of the side missions, etc., and did play for quite a while. It was mostly just that there were still 100% mapping and stuff like that that I really didn't do or had any interest in, as well as probably some landmarks and stuff that I didn't get around to. It wasn't something that I needed to explore in as much detail as other entries in Gearbox's series. And then, of course, there's Cyberpunk 2077, which is a very hard game to technically finish in its entirety. But I can tell you that I did the story missions, I did the side quests, I explored a great amount of the city, and if there was stuff that I skipped over, it was mostly just extraneous stuff or things that were not very pertinent to the overall experience of the game.
I like playing Cyberpunk a lot like I would play something like a GTA personally. Not like doing the missions, but like, hey, I'm just gonna kind of drive around and, oh, there's crime, let's go. Or there's a cyber psycho, or there's, just random stuff. Although I wish it was more like GTA, where you could just be like, I am a jackass in Night City. You just want to attack pedestrians? Sure. Not that we need a lot of games where that's what you can do, but you can't hurt any of the civilians in that game. Which I get, I guess, but like, games that I completed but didn't 100% would be like Space Marine 2, for instance. I've played the entire campaign. I have not gone back through and played it on the highest difficulties. I have not gone back through and played the new operations yet. I'm waiting for more content update for me to go back and play more, because I'm like, there's stuff there, but it's a lot of the same. PvP, I haven't like played all the matches and gotten all the equipment in PvE, so like I've finished the game. I played through all the operations, but I have not 100%ed that game. So
I mean, we're still in the realm of game good, liked game, enjoyed playing game, but there's eventually a point where you just peace out, because anything that's left is not really up to a standard that you put into the rest of the game, or it doesn't have the same kinds of things that you enjoyed about the other parts of the games. I think a lot of people might say that, like, for Witcher 3, you might not necessarily have done everything in the game, but chances are you did do Gwent. Let's face it. You still probably played through the Gwent. Maybe you
that's
skipped
unfortunate.
it.
I would like
had
to have skipped more of it.
First time you get to a new town, who are the Gwent players? I'm taking you out.
We're two different people, because I get side games in games and go, please no, this is poorly implemented and terrible 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So like, Gwent for me was, no thank you, I signed up to play a monster fighting game, not a card game. But also for me, not an as recent example, Skyrim. I've definitely not done all the quests in the game. I've definitely not done all the Radiant quests in the game. I've definitely not killed all the dragons and the ancient dragons and all those things. Because a lot of those things, random spawns, whatever. But like, I've done what I consider to be the main story. And I could say I've finished Skyrim and mean it.
So the okay case for stopping playing a game is, this is gonna be
Number 3.
Number 3, the okay case. This is, where it gets a little bit more obscure. It's, you recognize the game as being great, but can't find the bandwidth to continue playing.
I have so many of these games.
The examples that I'm going to give for this one are games that I actually ranked very high on best to worst lists in the past, and can recognize as being really innovative and wonderful, but frankly are the kinds of games where I had to stop playing them for that very reason. I just couldn't find the energy or capacity to continue playing them. And those games are going to be Baldur's Gate 3, which is a wonderful CRPG, probably one of the best examples that we have ever seen in terms of storyline and voice acting, sound design, interactivity with the landscape. Everything about it is just incredibly good. Unfortunately, it is also the kind of game where after 30 hours or so, I just realized that I don't know if I can keep going with it, because I know that there's another 100 hours of it and it's going to be good, but I don't feel like I have the attention right now in order to continue playing it. And CRPGs, with the way that they are paced, have a tendency to do this in general. And then Hi-Fi Rush is my other example, which is a wonderful rhythm-based, cel-shaded game from Tango Gameworks, and it is charming, and it is fun, and it is slick, and it is crisp, and it plays so well, it sings, but it is also one of those games that, after playing for a while, you just find that you can't really continue playing it. It's obviously good, you can tell that it's really good, you want to like it a lot, but I don't know if I can keep doing this rhythm-based combat for a long period of time. Not because it isn't good, not because it didn't do a great job at presenting itself, but me personally, I don't know if I can do it for any length of time.
I don't have as much bandwidth nearly as I used to anyways, and my bandwidth isn't... It's part of that ADHD dopamine bullshit that happens, which is we do not get enough dopamine in our system, which, causes problems.
Mm-hmm.
I need that dopamine to be real good.
Yeah.
and it does not scratch those needful itches like, say, an action game would.
Right.
Which sucks, because action games generally have much worse stories in them. Another one of those games for me that is a game I can see like being good, but just don't have the bandwidth. Helldivers.
For me too. I really loved Helldivers 2. I thought it was so well executed. It was so well executed. If I have to get better at this, and I do higher level missions, and that's kind of the progression, yeah, I'm probably going to have to be in larger teams, and I don't really want to just do this with randos. I want to do this with people I know, and
Right.
It's going to be a lot.
What are the other games? A couple other games. Witcher 3, for instance. You know, I haven't finished that. I can see how it's great, but like, I've recommended it to other people. Like, it's an amazing game. It's just, I've bounced off it. Oh, Dark Souls, Elden Ring. Those would fit in this category. I have played a bit of Dark Souls, 1 and 3 maybe? 1 and 2 maybe? And like, I can see why people like them, but it's not for me.
Anybody who's watched the shows knows that FromSoft has always been a point of contention, because I could never gel with the world building and the landscape that they're trying to make and how they build those games. It's not that I don't appreciate that they did it. That's the big thing, is that, like, boy,
I think the world building is great.
It's amazing that they did the world building. I just find it too obtuse for me to enjoy it. In the middle spot, what I'm calling the fine case. That's a fine case you got there.
Fine.
The game has qualities you engage with, but not enough qualities to play the overall game.
There are two examples that I wanted to give for this category. The first one is Risk of Rain 2, which is a very interesting roguelike that a lot of people enjoyed, and I understand the reasons why. It has new guns and characters that can be unlocked through different runs, and I think that the big problem, for me at least, was just that I didn't really feel much urge to continue doing runs after I did a few of them, and I wasn't really seeing as much level progression as I might have wanted to see in terms of what I was able to unlock over the course of the game. It is one of those cases, like many of them in these middle spots, that are prime candidates for second chances, games that I will go back to, maybe when I'm in a different headspace, and they had certain things that were really interesting about them, but not enough that I wanted to continue playing them for any length of time. The second game that I wanted to put in this category is one that seemed to be kind of divisive among the overall gaming community, which is Death Stranding, because while it has an interesting concept for me, the idea of being a courier in this world that is ultimately trying to rebuild from a devastation, and being able to drive across this landscape and making traversal one of the main mechanics and priorities of the game, the overall experience also felt very sparse, and I wasn't getting into it in the same way that Hideo Kojima's previous games in, like, the Metal Gear series had done for me. And again, this is one of those things that I feel like I will probably go back to. I have planned on going back to it at some point, but at the time, I really didn't have much urge or desire to continue playing after I had been in it for, I guess, maybe 5-6 hours.
It's hard to say negative things about Hideo Kojima, but in much the same way as David Lynch, by the way, rest in peace, David Lynch. You do some amazing world building, even though I have no idea what's happening. Like, it's very obscure world building. Death Stranding was like that for me, where it's like, he's doing something. I don't know what, but it is something.
I recently tried, like, the first Descendant. It's kind of like a Destiny-style MMO kind of game. It's not bad. I like some of the things that they're doing with it, but at the end of the day, it's not enough to keep me interested in actually playing it more. Like, there's a couple things that I think are okay, but then the rest of it's like, not, I don't gel with that as much. Like, it's also got, like, kind of like gotcha mechanics in it. So, like,
If you're initially enjoying it and there's stuff in it that you like, where it's like, oh, this is neat. Like, this is neat. But then you start to realize that being neat isn't necessarily something that can sustain you long term.
I mean, that example would be something like StarCraft X that I tried as well.
Oh, really?
I try free-to-play games all the time. And that one is more of a, like, not Chernobyl, but, like, it's that kind of post-apocalyptic guns, extraction shooting. But it's also got PvP. And I was like, okay, some of the stuff I see they're doing are interesting.
Yeah.
But, like, I bounced off that one real quick. I think, how many hours have I put into it? 2.5. I bounced off that real quick. First ascendant, 7.3 hours. So, like, yeah, I stuck with it for a couple play sessions.
Sure.
And then I was like, all right, I kind of see what we're doing. I got another hero that I can use.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the stuff you like is not enough to keep you playing the game.
Exactly. And that leads us to kind of like the
Number
downward.
5.
Yeah. What I call the bad case. You want to enjoy the game, but the game keeps getting in the way.
Actually, that would probably be where Dark Souls falls for me.
The bad case scenario actually includes many examples that I could cite. One of them is definitely not fried chicken, although I am going to talk about that in much more depth over on our Patreon. Other ones, however, are Lemon Cake, which is like a cozy game where you make bakery, but the problem, of course, with it is that it is very granular in how it presents its mechanics. For instance, trying to serve your customers is basically a step of taking one dish at a time and making one dish at a time with the individual ingredients. There's no real way to automate or batch any of this so that I can carry like 4 of my toffees out at a time. It really has to be a 1-to-1, and this is on a time limit, which just starts to make things feel tedious. Additionally, there is Outward, a game that originally inspired this list, which is one that I recently went back to because, again, the idea seems to be really interesting about creating a world where you are able to start as just some person who has debt that they need to pay off in a fantasy world. Wonderful setup, wonderful concept, and kind of very open-ended in how you can do your progression in the game. But the problem, of course, is that it has very weird mechanics. The fighting is very awkward. The idea of your backpack that you have to continually take off and put back on in order to do fighting is really odd. There were a lot of things when I played the game where I was just finding that, well, if they just changed these 16 things, then the game would be really fun. But unfortunately, I can't fast travel in this. I don't know where I am on the map because there were no map markers. To be fair, the DLC that they created later did fix some of these problems, but it still had the overall awkwardness that I was never really going to get past.
I don't remember how long I played it for. It was maybe about that. I was also trying this one with Crave because it's a multiplayer game. Combat was just, even at the beginning, it was just like so terrible.
And then, one that seems pretty pertinent for the upcoming sequel that is coming out soon, Kingdom Come Deliverance, a game that has a wonderful thought process behind it, where you get to be in this like historical Bohemia, and you get to play a tale of revenge as Henry tries to find the people that decimated his village, and you get to learn new skills, but it's also incredibly granular in so many of its systems, picking up individual flowers, having multiple steps if you want to learn how to make potions for yourself, having to keep your armor clean, and of course, the thing that really sunk it for me both times that I played it, which is that the combat system is just so weird. It's just so weird. The idea of needing to have your sword in certain positions, but it's based on how you're angling in the camera as you're locked on to different targets is just never something that felt natural or fun for me in the game. It never sung, and that unfortunately was a huge part of the game. Sometimes the realism that they were trying to put into the game was its worst quality for me as a player.
I think actually a game that probably fits that category for me is Jedi Fallen Order. Because
Yeah.
I really want to love it, and my friend just finished it and said the story was amazing. And I was like, yeah, no, the cinematics and story and the visuals look gorgeous, but like, I don't want to have to play the game on easy mode. But I also, games like that, I want them to have some way I can customize a character that's not all cosmetics. So the game gets it in its own way for me by not having enough game.
This is worst case scenario. And the game is frustrating, boring, or tedious, even though there are glimmers of enjoyment under the surface.
Oh, yeah.
There are 3 examples that I'm going to cite for worst case scenario. One of them is one that I tried again recently called The Long Dark, which should be right up my alley, especially after I played Green Hell and really loved that game. The problem, of course, is that The Long Dark is kind of obtuse in how it presents its mechanics. It really didn't start off on the right foot anyway, because apparently after I purchased it, it was just giving me the survival mode and not a story mode, which is sold separately. Please, just in the future games, do not do that. I don't like that as a general framework of selling your game. But in addition to that, I did start a survival version of this game and found that really to advance at all in it, I would have needed to get a hatchet and or a knife, but I also didn't seem to be able to figure out how to make a hatchet and or knife. And so spinning my wheels after a few hours, not really knowing how I'm supposed to even progress in the game, led me to bounce off of it, and I don't really plan on going back to it this time around.
Similar to like Ark Survival Evolved. I got in there and I was like, okay, it's I've played games like this or games that are based off this before, you know, I should have an idea, and I went in and I was like, oh no, there's like no UI, no tooltips or anything like that, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And it's like, I didn't know you could pick up rocks on the beach. There's no indicator on the rock. There's no thing that says pick up or any change in your crosshair or anything like that to indicate it's an interactable object. And so I'm like, just kind of hit it. And I was like, I can pick up rocks. I was like, that should be a moment that you're like, mind-blowing. But in this day and age, it's like, no, a game should have some sort of interface that lets you know that that's the thing you can do. Because otherwise I'm just going to get frustrated that I don't know that I can do it, and then find out 6 hours after I've been having this problem that I've been trying to solve that I can do this. It's not relief at that point, it is frustration that the game didn't let you know something that simple.
The second one that I would cite is more obvious, which is Redfall. Redfall is a game from a pretty acclaimed studio. I've liked their work in the past, which is Arcane. They do a really good job when they're doing an immersive sim, but that really wasn't what Redfall was supposed to be. It was more of an open-world, multiplayer sort of vampire game, but it really felt rushed. It felt incomplete. It didn't feel like they had had the time to flesh out all of the bugs and glitches and oddness of the game, and the general framework of it really didn't have those kinds of immersive sim things that you expect from an Arcane game if you had played Prey or Dishonored.
Yeah, the way to solve this problem, don't have publisher or developer loyalties. I don't care who made a game. I'm like, oh, I don't know who they are. At one point, it's like, okay, well, Bethesda, I know what to kind of expect from a Bethesda game that says Bethesda on it. And then you get Starfield, and you're like, yeah, it's got the hallmarks of Bethesda, but man. On the other end of that, we get No Man's Sky, Hello Games, and they're going, hey, we have a game that we're making right now when we're not going to tell you it's coming out yet, but Light No Fire is going to be a thing. With your track record, I see where you want to go, what you want to do, and I'm hopeful for that, but you've earned a bit of faith in that. But will not be forgiven if you do the same thing on release of the new game that you did at the release of the old one. So.
And then the third example that I give is kind of an odd one, but it is the original Diablo. And I think the reason why is that if you have played other Diablo games, and then you go back today to say, hey, I'm going to try the original Diablo, you are probably going to feel very disappointed, because the overall framework of the original game, where you have a few classes that are fairly rudimentary, you have a town, and then this endless dungeon that's randomly generated that you go through underneath the town, it is going to feel very, very simplistic and actually quite difficult by comparison to other games in the series. And it is incredibly difficult to go back to it if you are used to Diablo 2, because I would never recommend people try to play the original Diablo after Diablo 2. You are just going to be disappointed completely.
I mean, I have Diablo 2 Remastered, and I've played that a bit. I think I hopped off that one pretty quick, though, because I was like, alright, well, this kind of scratches that itch for a little bit, but, I wanted them to remaster Diablo 2, but also give it some quality of life updates, not just graphical updates.
Yes. We're getting to the worst case, and this is pretty obvious. The game is just unplayable, either technically or aesthetically, and you cannot force yourself to keep going. Any game you refund.
I've refunded so many games. I would say most of the games that I don't play end up falling into the category before this, where it's alright, well, there's just fundamentally something I don't like about it, kind of deal. The games I refund are games that within the first 30 minutes of, typically, I just don't gel with it. I feel bad when I refund a game I'm not going to play or enjoy and don't like within 30 minutes.
Right.
Mostly because I'm buying a game on the premise of what they're selling me in screenshots and descriptions or videos, and when it does not match my expectations, I'm not keeping your project. You can have it back.
So here I actually had a couple examples that I don't have video footage of, which was Gothic 3 and Arx Fatalis. Unfortunately, they are old enough that it is a little harder to get game footage of them the way I normally record. But Gothic 3, it was mostly a problem of being stuck in one spot and not being able to move at all, and Arx Fatalis being very difficult to understand in the mechanics of just doing anything, especially when they start introducing you to spell mechanics very early on with hand gestures and the like. Those are examples of games that just are basically unplayable. Unfortunately, the only game that I have footage of that was something I refunded is what you are seeing right now, which is Midnight Acres, and it is unfortunate because it is not like a big studio project. It's more of an indie game, but I just found that the two basic mechanics, the two things that it was trying to mesh together of a tower defense game and a farming sim, when put into practice, end up not working very well together, and the difficulty scaling and the intensity ramps up very quickly, which really undercuts the whole part where you want to play a farming sim. So unfortunately, that is what I have to show you right now in the video, but what I do want to say is that I have refunded other games in the past, and there are a variety of reasons, but it is just a basic idea of there is nothing I am going to get out of this, and I just have no reason to come back and play it again.
There's 30 minutes of my life that have just been wasted.
Yeah, my disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined. Yeah, there are definitely different feelings for me about how, I process, am I... that moment where it's should I stay or should I go? And you end up saying, I'm going. And the reason why you have to go. Yeah, why you have to go. But anyway, if anybody out there has any addendums or amendments, you feel free to let us know in the comments.
Contributions.
Yeah, any contributions to it, you just let us know in the comments down below. And anyone wanted to find out more information about Total Pebble Knockdown, Alex, where could they go?
You can go to TotalPebbleKnockdown.com.
That's right, you can. It's a good landing page for all of our stuff. You can also find us on Patreon. There's a Patreon banner over at the website. And you can find full episodes of the show put up there early, as well as additional content that never makes it into the episode.
Definitely not fried chicken.
Oh, yes. There's like a whole bonus segment that's going to be up on the website for this one, which is where I explain in more detail than I probably needed to why definitely not fried chicken would have fallen into the bad case scenario. So feel free to check that out if you are a Patreon over there. And you can also find us on every podcast app known to mankind. Please rate and review and subscribe where applicable. And you can find us on all of the dead social media networks, or at least a few of them. I am at Titanium.
I'm at EXP Limited, and the show is at Pebble Knockdown.
Check us out over there for all of your pebbling needs. And with that being said, now, if anyone is still listening to this show, you have reached the best case scenario of having finished the show. And now the show ends. Yeah.
Until next week.
What case could be made about the show that you just watched? Was it an okay case where you recognized it as being great, but you didn't have the bandwidth?
Probably didn't have the bandwidth. Yeah, most people don't have the bandwidth. I've seen our average viewer retention.
Yeah. But the thing about it is that they would have had to see this point at the end in order for them to acknowledge that it was that. So really, the only ones that could comment on this would be the ones that were in the top tiers of this particular list.
Funny thing is, we should do a recording sometime where we talk about something or make something say something hilarious right here at the end of the show.
Yeah.
And we clip it out of context at the beginning of another show and just say, oh, if you're wondering what that's from, you'll have to listen to this episode of
Total Knockdown. Yeah. Interesting idea for...
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work, but...
I mean...
But... There, let's clip that out of context for another episode.
Yeah, blown out mic included.
Yeah, let's clip out the blown out butts. There's the episode title.
I hope not.
Let's clip out the blown out butts. Anyway, folks, thank you for joining us on this episode of Total Pebble Knockdown. And we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.
Bye for now.